your testimony. Dr. Nasser, your written testimony indicates that there was a long sort of transition towards the events of August. And could you give us sort of a summary of the high points of that transition where the Taliban, and as Ms. Jocelyn indicated, that Taliban kept expanding its influence and working deliberately towards the events of August?
Mr. Chairman, even if we went back to 2015, 2016, the Taliban were steadily gaining territory. They had, through support of Pakistan, through varieties of other methods, had gained a great deal of military capability. And even though American forces were not on the forefront and the casualty numbers were down, but the casualty numbers of Afghan forces were rising. And if we looked at the gain in territory as a measure of how well the Taliban doing, they were winning. They were winning at a slow pace. The Doha Agreement essentially created a ceasefire between U.S. forces and the Taliban. But during those negotiations, the Taliban gains continued, and the casualty rate of the Afghan security forces continued to mount. The Taliban at Doha made a promise, I guess, that they would not inflict casualties on American troops, but they made no such promise about reining in either violence in Afghanistan or attacking Afghan security forces. And once and the surprising part is the pace at which they began to accumulate territory in 2021, leading up to the events of August. And that has a number of factors to it. One is the fact that they pragmatically made a lot more pacts with different warlords, with different tribal leaders who then influenced some members of their troops, some members of their tribes who were part of the troops. They made promise about protection of particular parts of Afghanistan if certain troops laid down their weapons. And we saw that whole-scale segments of the Afghan security forces made a deal. And finally, the Afghan security forces were poorly managed. They had not been paid for a very long time. And many said that the failure of the president of Afghanistan and the leadership in Kabul to create a united political front that the military could look up to and have confidence that there will be a political order after the United States left, led them to the conclusion that there would not be a government surviving in Afghanistan. It was too weak, it was too divided, and therefore they began to devolve to protect their own personal interests. And that led to a snowballing effect, that a small force of 75 to 100,000 fighters, perhaps supplemented with vigilante or other fighters coming over the border from Afghanistan, was able to sweep across the country at a rapid clip.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jocelyn, we stick to, or try to stick to, a 5-minute deadline, so I only have a bit of time. But you've made the point very incisively about the persistence of al-Qaeda, the association of al-Qaeda. One of the issues that we took some comfort from was the fact that they were present, but they did not appear to have the ability to project power outside of Afghanistan. And that was the key sort of benefit of our presence. Can you just very quickly comment on that?
Very quickly, most of al-Qaeda's assets in Afghanistan were devoted to winning the war. Some of those assets were actually devoted to striking outside of Afghanistan. It is no doubt in my mind the U.S. presence did keep a lid on that. For example, right before the 2016 presidential election, a guy named Farouk al-Qahtani was killed in Kunar in a drone strike. He was actually one of the top external operations guys, that means targeting the West, for al-Qaeda globally. I can give you, as you can probably guess, a lot of other details along those lines, but the bottom line is that you can cite guys like this who were taken out over the last several years even, who were absolutely involved in al-Qaeda's global operations.
And obviously we have to continue that but now over the horizon, and we'll hopefully get to those questions later. But my 5 minutes has expired, and with the concurrence of the ranking member, emphasize that 5 minutes is the